Broadcasting live. It's America's longest running talk show on computers. It's Computer America, bringing you the biggest names in technology with guest interviews, new products, and your emails. Listen live at computeramerica.com on any device around the world. Email the show at live@computeramerica.com or find us on social media. Be sure to check out our website for contests, giveaways, show notes, live video stream, podcasts, and more. You're listening to Computer America.
Hello and welcome into the Computer America Show. We are the nation's longest running, nationally syndicated radio talk show on computers and technology. Thank you for joining us. I hope all of you are doing well. And yeah, it is that time of the month again with Gamer Tuesday. This is a show dedicated everything and anything with computer gaming. Well, and not just computer gaming, but console gaming, handheld gaming, what have you, whatever strikes our fancy and whatever is, late breaking. Hey, it's going to be a lot of fun as we have the one, the only, our friend Cory Galliher works the Pop Zara, and we'll be talking to him in just a moment. But a couple of things to mention, including computeramerica.com. That is the one-stop shop for everything that we will be discussing today. So if you want to check out any games that we talk about, any videos that we feature, any, just really anything, check it out, computeramerica.com. It'll be on the homepage right there waiting for you. Also, be sure to check out the social media contest brought to you by Logitech, and be sure to check out the live video stream where you can watch Computer America and not just listen. So, all of that being said, I think we're just going to go ahead and jump right into this. So, as I said before, our resident gaming expert is the one, the only Cory Galliher, writes for Pop Zara, and of course is just an all-around intelligent guy and gamer. That's what we like. We like people who play these games. I sure play too much of them myself, but I think it's always a fun segment. So, Cory, how you doing? Hope you're doing well.
I'm doing great. Great to be here.
Happy to have you. Happy to have you. So, before we get started, just how is it going over at Pop Zara? Still writing, still doing good things there?
Pop Zara is a fantastic place to be. We got reviews. We have features. We've talked about all the new games. We got more reviews coming. If you're interested in the upcoming Final Fantasy 15 PC release, for instance, we're going to have a review of that up pretty soon, so take a look.
Very, very cool. You can only slightly hear the cattle prod in the background. That's very nice. But yeah, exactly. But no. So with that being said, let's go ahead and get started with some of our topics. You picked out a couple, and I think a good one to start off with is and it's never our hope to report bad things. It's we hope that every game is the best game ever, and we hope that they all succeed financially, artistically, and they're all critically raved and reviewed. But you have one here, and this is one that I didn't even hear about until I saw my first horrid review of the game. And that's not a good thing when the marketing fails so bad that the first time you even hear of it is, oh, this is completely and utterly terrible. And like I said, that's not a good thing. So why don't you fill people in, give us some background, and again, a title such as Metal Gear, you wouldn't think would have this kind of problem.
Sure. So with that, I believe we're talking about Metal Gear Survive, which is the latest in a very long-running series, much beloved by people who play games.
That's the one.
Yep. Metal Gear Survive, I don't really know how to condense the story of this game into a few sentences, but I'll give it a shot. Long story short, Metal Gear is a series of stealth-based games. You play as a secret agent, you infiltrate bases, things like that, complete missions, and for the most part, it's pretty well known for its deep and involving storyline, kind of like a big espionage thriller series. And a big part of this storyline was composed by a man named Hideo Kojima, kind of known as the father of this series. Now, Kojima worked for a company called Konami, which is the publisher of the Metal Gear games, and recently, I want to say 2015 or 16, he left the company. He's now formed his own, but that doesn't mean there aren't any more Metal Gear games. And the controversy with Metal Gear Survive is that it's the first Metal Gear game to come out without Kojima's involvement.
That is important because obviously, him being kind of the father of the whole thing, it's always whenever, kind of like when a movie, when like movie franchise switches directors or they do something new, everyone hopes that, they always compare them to the previous one. Is it better? Is it worse? And I guess, it seems like this is obviously worse. I'll say that, but it seems like they didn't even try to live up to his standard. They didn't even try to like follow, his example of this franchise.
So interesting thing about that, if you go to Popstar, read the review. Actually, I talk quite a bit about this game. I have to say it's one of my favorite games I've played this year, which you probably didn't expect to hear from me.
I did not.
Yeah, I think it's an excellent game. The issue, I think, in most people's eyes, is severalfold. First off, it is a great game. It is not a great Metal Gear game. It does not play very much like the previous ones. There is a stealth element, but it is largely not a stealth game. It plays more like I guess like a tower defense game. Like if you're familiar with, let's see, recent tower defense games, Fortnite is a tower defense game in part. So it's kind of like that.
Okay.
So if you come in expecting your traditional Metal Gear experience where it's this cinematic game focused on storyline, yeah, that's not what you're getting here, and that's gonna upset people. Sorry, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say that the obvious question is why, and I think Halo caught some of this when they made Halo Wars. It was kind of Microsoft's attempt to transition the franchise. Well, not transition the entire franchise, but adapt it to real-time strategy. And Halo fans, they kind of liked and they kind of dug the everything was kind of Halo-esque, but as a real-time strategy, it has some serious flaws as that kind of game. And, I don't think anyone would really call Halo Wars, the pinnacle of the franchise. Why do you think they felt the need for Metal Gear to, kind of branch out like this? Because it did very, very well in its niche.
Well, interesting thing about that is that this isn't the first time Metal Gear has done this. We've actually seen Metal Gear in particular branch off and go in different directions multiple times. We've seen it go... You might be familiar with Metal Gear Rising, for instance, which is an action-based game where you play as a cybernetic ninja. It's still a Metal Gear game, but it definitely doesn't play anything like the other ones. It's its own game, its own idea, its own concept, and it works well. On the PSP, when the PlayStation Portable first came out in the late 2000s, or maybe the early 2000s, sorry, there was a game called Metal Gear Acid, one of the launch titles for it. Metal Gear Acid was a card game based on Metal Gear. So again... Not exactly very much like the other entries in the series, but certainly a Metal Gear game. Definitely felt like it. Metal Gear Survive, if you ask me, it's much the same way. It's not a very stealth-based game, but it still feels like a Metal Gear game. I mean, it doesn't have the story-based aspect, but it has the kind of goofy humor the series is known for. It's a solid game. It's a solid game that encounters an issue, and that issue is that much as certain franchises kind of develop a following. Mm-hmm. We saw that with Metal Gear as well. We have this significant number of fans who are upset at what happened with Kojima. I mean, I'm told that his separation with Konami was not amicable, that there were some problems, and I think a sizable portion of the fan base has taken this personally, and they are responding to the first Metal Gear game sans Kojima, Metal Gear game without Kojima, rather, as kind of they're responding to it poorly as a sort of a means of getting of expressing themselves with regards to what happened to Kojima. Like, basically, you guys fired the director of Metal Gear, then made a new Metal Gear game. How could you? You're evil. You corporate jerkbags.
So you think some of these reviews and some of the sentiment is that, fan bases are fan bases. They
can be very fickle.
Right, and so you think some of this backlash isn't just about the gameplay, but it's the backstory behind it.
Sure. I mean, when we look at sales, for instance, sales numbers are always predicated with a few points. For instance, this only talks about retail. Well, retail is not really as much of a thing as it used to be anymore. This only talks about Steam digital sales. Well, that's great, but Metal Gear games are largely on console. So what we don't see, for instance, is how well Metal Gear Survive has done on the North American and European PlayStation Network, which is where you'd expect to sell a ton of copies. Mm-hmm. What we do know in regards to sales is that it's sold exceptionally well in Japan, which is the series' kind of home turf. So if it were really that terrible a game, if it were that awful, if it was just a straight up, D-list Kusoge, a terrible game, then I don't think it'd be selling like that. I think it'd be selling really poorly everywhere. I think nobody would want to play it, and that's clearly not the case.
Now, and I mean, at the same time, though, there are instances where a franchise puts something out just to cash in on brand loyalty. I mean, that is certainly a thing. I guess my question to you is, where was I hiding? What rock was I under that I didn't hear about this until the reviews started to come in? Because, you know, I feel like I wasn't advertised to or made aware of. There wasn't a lot of hype around this. I mean, was I just living under a rock, or was there some kind of ball dropped when it came to the release of this?
At least in North America, I can't speak to Japan. I think that's absolutely correct. I think that we definitely saw a lack of effective marketing for Metal Gear Survive. Certainly, I didn't hear of any TV spots, for instance, which tend to move a lot of copies. So yeah, that's certainly an issue. And as far as what you say about franchises releasing games simply I guess you'd almost say, milk their customers for nostalgia. Yeah, I think that was certainly involved in this. However, I don't think that you can have that happen and also not have a good game. I think it's possible to release a game like this that capitalizes on the name and yet still have it be fun and worth playing, which I think is what happened here. I think in a lot of cases, what we're seeing, like I said, is kind of a reaction to what happened to a beloved director, out of what I would call a misguided effort at punishing a corporation for what they did. Fact of the matter is, you can't really punish a video game corporation. You have a very small, hardcore fan base that cares about these things, and they're not large enough to affect the industry. They are large enough, however, and I talked about this in my review in Pop Czar, this is my intro to it. The hardcore gaming fan base is not large enough to really make large-scale changes to the gaming industry, but they are large enough to make some YouTubers and some pundits very, very rich by getting angry.
Okay. So you that was actually where I saw it, was a review on YouTube. There's someone who's very infamous for getting angry, and that's kind of.
Does his name start with J, like Angry Jack, perhaps?
Nope. Video game.
Not that one, huh?
Video game donkey, if we're gonna call it names.
Right, absolutely. And
yeah,
I would like to caution people, generally speaking. We have this idea going on right now that these people on YouTube are the source of truth, and that video game journalism is corrupt, and that you can only trust these YouTubers. I mean, fact of the matter is, they're making money same as anybody else. So if you're going into a game like Metal Gear Survive, it's difficult to find what I would call an unbiased opinion on it, because you have a group that's upset about the Kojima situation. You have a group that can make money off of people who are upset about the Kojima situation. You have a group that maybe wants to, try to capitalize on the backlash. Like, hey, this game's actually good. Read my review instead. Ha.
Yeah. So, I mean, the reason that the first time I heard it there, and I'm completely on your side, is that video game reviewers, especially YouTubers, they don't have to be unbiased or biased. It can really go either way. But at the bottom, at the end of the day, they have to be entertaining. And, saying it's an okay game and it's okay for these reasons, that's not entertaining. Being super excited is entertaining. Being super angry is exciting.
I would certainly rather watch somebody flipping out about, oh, this game is so terrible. It's the end of Metal Gear. What did they do to Kojima? You awful people. That's definitely a more interesting watch than, hey, it sucks what happened to Kojima, but this game's all right. You should check it out. It's only $40. Certainly one will outpace the other. Now, interesting point about this I want to bring up is your viewers even might have heard of James Rolfe, the angry video game nerd.
And they may have. I'm looking him up right now. Please, why do you bring him up?
Angry video game nerd, AVGN, one of the first people to really start capitalizing on the whole video game craze on YouTube. What he would do back in the late 2000s, mid 2000s, is he would make videos about old NES games, Nintendo Entertainment System's older retro games, and how terribly made they were. He would make a big show of getting angry about them, and he was funny. I mean, this guy was hilarious. It's if you haven't seen him before, you should definitely watch his show. He's a little bit foul-mouthed, but he's a funny guy. Point about this is that his success, as these things do, especially in the video game industry, his success informed the shape of things to come. So you'd end up with a guy called the Irate Gamer, because hey, that's different, right? It's definitely not a copycat.
Of course.
You'd end up a guy called the Happy Video Game Nerd, who did the same thing, but he was happy about games. It's the original. Point being that a culture developed over the years that was certainly influenced by this guy's popularity. And part of that is that, there's this kind of underlying current of rage and outrage that goes through the video game community. I think that played a part in it. So when we talk about Metal Gear Survive, it becomes difficult to discuss the game without that creeping in.
That's it. That's super interesting because and gamers can certainly be their own form of angry. I don't think anyone can really doubt that. But you're saying that it's kind of a form of the medium. Like it's more entertaining, and it's kind of an undercurrent that video game reviews kind of have to have. That you can't just, and as I said earlier, you can't just be kind of okay with it. You either have to be angry or excited. You have to be an extreme of an emotion for gamers to really think that, oh, this is a gamer. Like, you think that, if you're going to be accepted in this culture, you're going to have to be either super angry, super happy, super excited, or super enter emotion here.
Yes, absolutely. On top of the various demographic qualities that people use to, kind of keep people out of gaming, like you got to be white, cis, male, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, there is a lot of this kind of gatekeeping aspect of things, and in this case, we have a game that's being hurt by this. That I think a lot of people would enjoy if they allowed themselves to enjoy it instead of, see it as a game instead of seeing it as kind of this symbol, if that makes sense.
Gotcha. So I am currently wiping all the bad reviews out of my head that I have currently heard about Metal Gear Survive. Tell myself, tell the audience, just a quick, who would enjoy this? What aspects really grabbed your attention? What about this game made it a good game?
Honestly, in terms of how it plays, I mentioned Fortnite. Basically, it's a series of base defense missions, and it's essentially the same thing over and over again. It has a great multiplayer mode where you do essentially the same thing. The fact of the matter is it's a $40 game. You can't expect too much out of that. But bottom line is that it's extremely well polished. It's what you'd expect from a AAA game without AAA prices. There are little quirks to the gameplay that make it a lot of fun. There's a stealth aspect to it, maybe not as much as other Metal Gear games, but one that works. There's a crafting aspect to it, which a lot of people like. There's a kind of if you played Minecraft and you enjoyed going around the world and collecting items and kind of building up a reserve or stash of stuff, you'll enjoy Metal Gear Survive. There's a lot of that going on. Honestly, it's one of those games you kind of got to play for yourself. I talk a lot about everything surrounding the game, which kind of makes me guilty of the same issue. I think it's a great game, but I too kind of get caught up in the mythos surrounding Hideo Kojima and what happened with this game as a result. I think the best thing to do, and just to kind of go off the beaten trail again, I think this applies to a lot of video game writing, video game content in general, everything surrounding the industry except the games. We're at this point right now where you have these traditional video game outlets, your Polygons, your Waypoints, et cetera, who will write and produce content in a certain way. A lot of people get upset about the way that Waypoint, for instance, will focus on the more emotional, social side of video games. They'll get upset. And that's largely, in my mind, because the competition right now for your more traditional video game content, your oh man, this is the best game ever, oh man, this is the worst game ever, et cetera, that's on YouTube.
Gotcha.
Here's the difference. Sure. Difference between your more traditional outlets and YouTube. Your more traditional video game outlet has writers, has content creators, and they want to get paid. They expect paychecks. They're full-time on this. Your YouTube, you have people who maybe have as many subscribers, who will make their money, maybe don't expect the same kind of compensation, maybe don't need to be catered to in the same way, and maybe they'll stay on message for PR more than other people will. I'm not saying that you can't trust YouTube, but I'm saying that there's a certain degree of, how do you say, payola, I think, to a lot of what goes on YouTube that we don't really talk about. So, with PopZara, honestly, just going to out myself a little, I don't get paid to write on PopZara. What I do for PopZara is largely a hobby. Do I think that makes me more trustworthy? No. But do I think that if I were hunting for clicks and for views, would it affect the way that I write? Yes, almost certainly. I mean, I think it would affect the way anybody writes. If your paycheck comes from writing about Metal Gear Survive and talking about how outraged you are about what happened to Kojima and not really focusing on the game at all, then yeah, you'll probably write that. Much like if you write about Mafia 3, a game that came out a few years ago, and you write about the social aspects of the game and the racism involved and all that, maybe more so in the game, because that will get more clicks, then yes, that's what you're going to focus on.
See, here's my problem, though. You're describing a problem with media in general, and that is the idea of being viral, of I don't think virility is even the word. The ability for content to go viral, and we saw this with Facebook. We saw this with many other news stories where it was, the stories that were being shared weren't, GDP rises by 1.2%. That wasn't the one that got shared. The one that got shared was, local economies in decimation. These industries are going by the wayside. Click here to find the 5 jobs that are going to make you the most money.
These industries going by the wayside.
Right,
yes.
right. And it's the ability for people to read something, agree with it. That has to be key. They have to agree with what you're saying, because if they don't agree, they won't share it. So you have to play to their ideals. You have to play to some kind of sense of imminent or pertinent information, and then that gets shared. So really, I think you're right. If you want clicks in gaming, in just general journalism, in media in general, and it's kind of back to YouTube. You have to be excited. You have to be angry, frustrated, scared, and those emotions are the ones that get shared over and over and over again and make people money. So I can see why you say that, you don't get paid for this, is because, hey, when you do, I'm not saying that you can't be objective, but there's a strong incentive to not be objective.
Right. There are multiple aspects to the reason that I stick with PopZara despite it not being a non-paying outlet. And, one of those is exactly what we just talked about. The fact that I don't really believe you can be totally objective if you're cutting a paycheck for this. I think that if you're on YouTube and you have a Patreon, I think that's going to influence your objectivity. I think you will know what your audience wants to hear. And I think even subconsciously, you will not take actions to go against them because they're paying your bills every month. Do I think that this means that you can't trust anybody who is getting paid for what they do? No, absolutely not. And I think it's important instead to get a diversity of opinions. Like if we look at Metal Gear Survive, going back to the game itself, I'm not the only one who gave it a good review. If you look at Kai Powell from WFCC Tech, he also enjoyed the game. And hilariously, if you go on the review, scroll down to the comments, what are you going to see? Oh, Konami paid for this review. They bought this review. Yada, yada, yada. They must have paid this guy to say this game was good. And I'm just sitting here thinking to myself, I think paying for this review would have cost more than the game itself took to make. So I don't know what you're talking about. Anyway, the point I'm trying to make is that, don't just read one review. Don't just believe the hype. Don't just listen to what you hear and assume it's correct. I feel like, especially with a game that costs less than it costs $40, and you can get it for less if you try at all.
Right. But to be fair, you did link, and we do have this in the show notes. You did link to Metacritic. It's a website that aggregates scores and things like that. User reviews, like you said, users
1.2.
The users are definitely upset. You mentioned that earlier. The critic scores, I mean, there's a big discrepancy between the user score and the critic score. Critics are kind of like, it's an okay game, not great, not bad. Users say it's absolutely must not play. So is that kind of what you're getting at?
Yeah, that's exactly the point I'm trying to make. Like the other thing to consider too, I mean, these are user reviews. Anybody can write these, and who's going to take the time to do it?
The people who are angry with their product.
Correct. And it's the same reason we don't go on Wikipedia and cite our papers from it, If anybody can write anything, then anybody will. It's, again, I'm not going to say every single user review is untrustworthy. I'm not going to say anybody's wrong. Maybe if getting angry about a Japanese game developer who does not know you exist and who will never care who you are, maybe you're just really upset about the loss of his job and you want to show it, and that's why you're not buying this game. If that's what makes you feel good, if you feel like you've accomplished something there, then knock yourself out. Not going to stand in your way. If you were interested in playing a good video game and the financials of some random Japanese company don't really matter to you, which is where I stand, then I think Metal Gear Survive is worth a look at least. I mean, certainly, if it's selling that poorly, then it's going to be at half price within a month anyway. So at that point, definitely give it a shot if you ask me.
I gotcha. So, and it's available through Steam, I see. That seems to be the best place to pick it up. And by the way, what consoles did they release this for?
PS4, Xbox One, Steam. If you're going to think about playing Metal Gear Survive, you definitely want to find some friends who will join you. Again, it is a very inexpensive game. You can probably find at least 1 or 2 people. Fantastic multiplayer. That is the reason I recommend the game. If you can get some friends together, 3 or 4 friends playing together on voice, yes, absolutely worth your time.
Is there matchmaking? Can you kind of pick people up, or is this simply
There is matchmaking, yes. I wouldn't recommend it. I would suggest definitely that you have some friends you can coordinate with because it can be difficult.
Okay. All right. Well, and that's just the thing, 40 bucks and 3 friends, that is extremely high barrier to entry for myself. But I will say that's, okay. So there you go. And again, you have a review more complete than we just discussed here over at Popstar. So check that out. So with that being said, let's go ahead and jump into our next one. And okay, how about this? I don't know if you are for or against this. I'm kind of hoping, to kind of go with the dark side. This game wasn't too well reviewed by certain people. Into the Breach. I think I have seen some of this, and this kind of plays like a turn-based strategy game. So let's talk about Into the Breach. What is it, and why did you feel the need to include it today?
Well, once again, to talk about why I wanted to include it, we have to kind of get into the backstory of Into the Breach. And the backstory is that it was created by the same people who made the game FTL, Faster Than Light, which, if you're not familiar with this game, it was one of the first big successes from crowdfunding in video games via the Kickstarter outlet.
Mm-hmm.
So if you're not familiar with crowdfunding, then I try to keep things relevant to people who aren't too familiar with games.
Sure.
Crowdfunding is where you go into a site, in this case Kickstarter, and you say, hey, I have this great idea for a game, but I can't afford to make it. Will people chip in maybe the $1, $5, $10, $100? And if everybody chips in and makes this amount of money, I'll be able to afford to make this game. And those of you who help me will get a bonus, like maybe a cool looking ship when the game comes out. Maybe I'll sell you land plots. And
also, and also to be clear, this is also, these monetary amounts, they are rewards. So either you buy an early release of the game, you buy extras like you're about to, line out there. But essentially, it's not just donation. It's I trust your vision. Let me get in on this early.
Sure, absolutely. And it's interesting too because this was kind of a defining factor of the industry around the turn of the decade, around 2011, 2012, 2013. Kickstarter was a giant. I mean, you couldn't go anywhere in the gaming community. You couldn't look at forums. You couldn't go anywhere without, number one, hey, I've got a Kickstarter, give me money. Number two, if you dare to suggest that you shouldn't give somebody money, you're going to get banned, et cetera, et cetera. It was a big deal. And a lot of what happened back then is that people would come up with Kickstarter ideas. They would collect a lot of money for them. They'd make the money, and then we wouldn't see a game, and that's rough. These days, you'll find that Kickstarter is maybe somewhat less relevant than it used to be as a result. However, FTL, kind of a spaceship-based game, a roguelike, where if you die, you have to start over, actually did release, made its money on Kickstarter, released, very well received, did well enough that now we have Into the Breach, which is a strategy game for the people who made FTL.
Makes sense. So, all right. So obviously fans are a fan of it. And Into the Breach, I mean, is this a literal sequel to their first game, or is this?
No. This is a different idea entirely. The idea behind Into the Breach is that there's an alien race attacking the planet. You have to go back in time to stop them. But the issue with going back in time is that it requires a lot of energy. So you have to go back in time. With only your 3 units, you have a mech, a tank, and some artillery. And you have to stop these aliens in the past from, number one, killing your units, number two, getting rid of your energy sources, like blowing up your coal power plants and so on and so forth, because if that happens, well, you're stuck.
Mm-hmm.
So the idea is somewhat similar to, I guess, Final Fantasy Tactics, or hell, if we go back a little bit further, even maybe chess. The aliens will show you what they're going to do. They're going to move into different squares and attack your units, but you'll know what they're doing before you take your turn. And then when that happens, you can use the knowledge you gain by seeing what they're going to do in advance to plan your own moves and stop them. So let's say a bug is going to go up and attack one of your units. Well, they've made their intentions clear. You can use your own attacks to push that bug and maybe make it attack its friend instead, or maybe push it out of the way or drop it into the water so it dies. Things like that. It's
very intelligent aliens, I'm gathering.
Yeah. The fact that they'll plan out their attacks and still do them if they're forced to move, yes, they're geniuses.
Exactly. But Cory, we're actually about to head into break here in about 50 seconds. But honestly, what you've laid out so far, and just from what I've seen, strategy is one thing. Although I'd kind of call it real time strategy is kind of my version of strategy. This almost seems like a puzzle game.
Yes, absolutely.
Right. So all right. So everyone, if you're watching the video portion, we just watched the trailer for it, and we're gonna going to check all that out. Music means we're going to take a break. We are talking to Cory Galliher, writer for Pop Zara, of course, and Computer America's resident gaming expert. Everyone, we'll be right back. More Cory Galliher, more Into the Breach, and more, well, hey, all things Gamer Tuesday when we come back. Everyone, stay tuned. We'll be right back. Computer America.
Dish TV is better than cable TV. Why? Because you can save 45% on packages compared to your high-priced cable bill. Wow. Take those giant scissors out and cut the cable and save with Dish TV. Plus, you get a free DVR upgrade to record your favorite shows and free installation. And with Dish Anywhere, you can watch TV for free on your mobile device. Act fast. You can save hundreds of dollars. Does your cable company do that for you? I don't think so. Get all the best TV programming at your fingertips at a fraction of the price of cable TV. So say adios, arrivederci, goodbye to the high cable bill and save up to 45% on Dish TV packages today. These are limited time offers and can change at any time. Call fast.
800-471-5325. 800-471-5325. 800-471-5325. That's 800-471-5325.
Greece is cheap.
But the airfare costs a fortune.
Paris?
Not much closer, and again, airfare...
What about Puerto Vallarta?
Let's face it, flying anywhere is just too expensive.
Wait, what's this? Low-cost airlines.
With one call to low-cost airlines, you'll drastically slash your travel costs. We're talking insanely low airline prices to any of your favorite destinations. Where would you like to go? London, Rome, Costa Rica, Australia?
Wow, that's cheap.
So why wait? Call now to learn how crazy cheap it is to fly anywhere in the U.S. or international. Our prices are so low, we can't publish them. The only way to get them is to call to instantly hear the most amazing best deals on airline travel. It's that easy. So call now and start packing.
800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. 800-215-4461. That's 800-215-4461.
And welcome back to the Computer America Show. It is 31 minutes past, 32 minutes past the hour as we continue on here and we talk to the one, the only Cory Galliher. And yeah, let's go ahead and jump right back into it. So we're talking about this game, Into the Breach, available through Steam. And yeah, control powerful mechs from the future to defeat an alien threat. Each attempt to save the world presents a new randomly generated challenge in this turn-based strategy game. So I guess that's where the puzzle idea kind of goes out the window, is that, you know, it's not like, oh, I'm on level, 110 instead of level 213, is that randomly generated. I guess that's where the element of strategy comes into. So just to be clear, Cory, have you played this yet, or is this something that was brought to your attention?
I've played a little bit of it so far. I talk about it being a puzzle because it offers you situations that you will solve in much the same way as you would solve a puzzle. Alien A is going to do this. How do I deal with this? What's my response? If I go and shoot Alien A, what's Alien B going to do? Et cetera, et cetera. It's not like a traditional puzzle game where, every level has its own individual solution. It's more of a kind of a think on your feet kind of thing, except without the feet aspect of it.
Gotcha. And, it's for anyone out there wondering, oh, man, this sounds great, but my computer is just too dang slow.
Well, about that.
Yeah, the graphics are not super demanding, it looks like.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. And, some people at this point, we've had the indie game thing going around for at least 10 years now, a little bit more maybe. And yeah, indie developers are big fans of this kind of graphical style, this kind of old retro 8-bit style, because it's easier to make and it's cheaper, et cetera, et cetera. The nice thing about this, if you ask me, is the fact that will run on a toaster. I mean, if you have a really nice toaster, plug it in, attach a monitor, put in some toast, you can play Into the Breach on your toaster.
That is awesome. So how much, and $15, we always talk about video games being one of the best money spent versus hours of entertainment you can do.
Yes.
Gaming is a very frugal type of hobby. Now, talk to me about how long you've played it, and how long you expect to play it, and how long kind of they expect you to play it.
I've only played a few hours so far, but I expect to stick with it for a while because a lot like FTL, these guys' original game, this is not something you're going to get very far in the first time you play it, or the second time, or the fifth time, or maybe even the 10th time. The nice thing about this kind of game where it's randomly generated is that the rules remain the same. You can learn as you play, and as you learn, you'll get farther. And one day, when you've learned enough, you can finally beat the game. So in that sense, yeah, absolutely. I mean, if you talk about economy, this kind of genre, this game where you play and play and play and learn more and more and more, I feel like it's easier to make because a lot of it's randomly generated. There's no, you pay less for artists, etc. You pay less for level designers and so on.
Mm-hmm.
Other aspect of that is that it's good for you, the player, because you're learning, but you're also dying, which means a lot of repeating content that won't feel stale because it's randomly generated. It's the best of both worlds, really. I think Into the Breach is a fantastic title. If you have the money to spare, and you probably should for $15, take a look.
There you go. And, I'm actually going to kind of flow into just a real quick game of my own that I received for review. And sure. I'll be honest, I played, an hour and 10 minutes is what I currently have logged on it. I'll see if you have heard of it. Have you heard of a game called Wolverblade?
Wolverblade, yes. I reviewed that one for Popzara some time ago.
Yeah. So, yeah, I just played that. Let's see. I just played that about a month ago, 2/7. So, yeah, almost exactly about a month ago. Again, got about an hour and 10 minutes into it, and I just couldn't find myself wanting to pick it back up. So, since you have played a bit of it, just real quick, what were your feelings of Wolverblade?
Well, I can see why you stopped playing. It's quite the difficult game, isn't it?
Difficult, like... I grew up on Battletoads. The type of game, everyone out there who's listening, Battletoads, except with Europeans, and I think it's like the Roman Empire versus the Scottish, barbarians, and of course you play the side of the barbarians. It's very much kind of, you are limited by, the fight screen, and you pick up weapons, you upgrade, you fight lots and lots of, kind of people. Hard, yeah, but that was, I feel, mostly because of how clunky the attacks felt for me. Like, it's, taking that same concept from 30 years ago, from, the kind of side scrollers, and putting it in today's graphics made it look way too busy for me, and it was just kind of hard to control versus what I'm kind of used to. So yeah, kind of in a sort. I mean, again, what did you think of it?
I thought it was pretty solid. As I mentioned, I think it's a little bit difficult, especially for what it is, which is kind of a side-scrolling brawler. If you've ever played the ancient retro Golden Axe games, I think that's kind of what it's trying to be. So if you enjoy that sort of game, yes, that's all for you. Is Wolverblade going to be one that I go back to time and time and time again? Probably not. But if you can get a friend together, play some local co-op, yeah, I think it's a great choice. Maybe go in for a little bit more than an hour.
Yeah, most likely. And I definitely did play it single player. I'll probably go back and try to beat it. The story was okay. Definitely was not engrossed in the characters they tried to spell out, but I think for the setting and for what they tried to do, it was certainly fun. It was certainly fun.
Wolverblade runs into an issue that I've noted a few times when I'm reviewing modern indie games, which is that back in 2007, 2008. We had this big surge of games based on the Flash engine.
Yes, sir.
Flash, which, yeah, absolutely. And Wolverblade strikes me as a game that would have really flourished back then, with the big issue being that you wouldn't have had to pay for it. You probably would have gone to Armor Games or Congregate. You would have played it there. It would have killed some time during your lunch hour at work or whatever. And when that's done, you forget about it. Here, I believe it's $15. And yeah, that's going to change people's minds about Wolverblade, I hate to say.
Yeah, that's about how I kind of felt about it, was that, this did remind me of, like, there was like a stick fighting Flash game that was very reminiscent of it. And I think, you said it, that's probably it. It felt like games I used to play for free that I now, would have had to pay $15 for. And it's a good game. There's more production value. I mean, there's voice acting, there's, cutscenes and things like that. But again, it's just not very engaging, I think, for me. So, anyways,
and a big complaint. Yeah. Sorry, I was just gonna say a big complaint that we hear from indie developers these days, and these days there are a lot of indie developers, is that it's difficult for any one individual indie game to get a lot of attention and make money. Which, I mean, back in the day, you would get paid by Congregate, you would get paid by Armor Games, et cetera, et cetera. Whereas now, you're making games that would have been on those sites, you're pushing them to Steam yourself, you're asking for $10 for them. It doesn't surprise me that a lot of indie games that might have otherwise been amazing are having trouble making money now because there's too many.
That could certainly be an issue, of course. You have things like Steam Greenlight system. You know, you mentioned Kickstarter earlier, or
Yes.
rather crowdfunding services altogether. That has transitioned kind of into Steam Greenlight, which is a program where indie developers or smaller games, try to get some exposure on Steam. They help them out with, with exposure, pre-sales, and yeah, you try to get your game off the ground. It's kind of become the thing to start on Kickstarter or GoFundMe or Indiegogo, and then you transition to Green Steamlight, and then maybe you go to a venture capitalist and you try to raise money from a bigger gamer studio or something like that. I mean, there are ways to make money, but it's so inundated. I think you're right. It's so inundated, it's hard to stand out. So,
Back in the days when, say, Braid and Aquaria and games like that were starting to really get off and take off, we had a certain group of indie developers, you kind of saw them as a kind of a clique, and what they would say every single time they spoke up was, everyone can make games. Everyone should make games. Games are an art form. People should make more games. Well, they did, and now nobody's making money. So what I think is going to happen is that we're probably going to see a contraction of the industry from that perspective as people just become less able to afford to make games. When there's if we look at Steam, I think on a daily basis, at least 30 new indie games come out a day, one day on Steam, 30 games. How do you know if any of those is good? Well, maybe you check YouTube, but who knows if anything is actually good on YouTube because they get paid for what they say. So maybe you check a traditional site. Well, who knows? They don't talk about games. They talk about social aspects of games.
right.
Bottom line is that there is an inundation, as you say, and it's making it very difficult to see what you should play, what's worth playing, and it makes it hard for everybody. I would say that for the player, for the people who's buying games and playing games, this is one of the best times we've ever had. This is the golden age of games. For everybody else involved in the industry, maybe not so much.
Right. And by the way, for everyone out there who was listening last Friday, we talked with another indie developer, but this one actually has some pedigree, so I wanted to direct some people to it as well. If you didn't hear when we talked to All Yes Good, that was the gaming company, and their game is called Octageddon. That's from the creator of Plants vs. Zombies. He was the creative director for the first one. He was, kind of the creative director for the second one, but kind of hands off on that one.
Yeah, got fired by EA after the second one.
Yeah. He didn't. Yeah, and we actually talked about that during the interview. He couldn't meet his sales quota for monetization within the game, i.e. microtransactions. So, if you're going to be fired, I think that's a good reason to be fired, for not wanting to, suck more money out of your player base. So anyways, he came on the show talking about his new game that he released himself, and hey, it was a pretty interesting interview all around. So I want to direct people back to that, and to, of course, Octageddon. So anyways, there's that one. And if you're still watching the video portion, we still have Into the Breach. Any final comments on Into the Breach? Is this something, like you said, you're just getting started in it? Who would you say would be really interested in this game?
Into the Breach fits really well, and I would say this a lot about a lot of really well-made indie games. Into the Breach fits really well if you have 15 to 20 minutes to half an hour to play a game. You want to knock out, say, a coffee break. Boom, there you go. Into the Breach is perfect for you. You do one map. It won't take you long. You'll feel good when you solve the puzzles. It's solid stuff.
All right, there you go. So there you go, and we do have a link to that in the show notes. Now let's go ahead and keep with the games, and then maybe we'll head off into some higher level thinking. But Final Fantasy, that is one franchise that has been around for as long as video games. It seems like as long as video games have been around, and it's one that I never really got into. The first time I truly tried to get into Final Fantasy was Final Fantasy. Oh my God, which one was the one with lightning? It might have been like 11 or 13.
That was 13.
Yeah. So it was 13, and I had to stop because I felt like I was watching more cinematics than I was playing the game. It was extremely frustrating to me. And I know that Final Fantasy, the games, they come in two flavors, either the turn-based strategy game or they come in MMOs or RPGs. And, there's kind of a, one for each generation of gamer. Final Fantasy 15, I think that was the one that was an MMORPG. You can correct me. But, yeah, you have a story here coming to PC. Why is that important?
So you talk about MMORPGs. Final Fantasy is a very long-running series. There have been 2 MMO games that were 11 and 14. 15 is the latest in the main series of the games. Basically kind of a buddy story about a prince and his friends who go on an adventure across a world that's kind of set in contemporary times. The characters have what look like iPhones. They drive around in a car. It's stuff like that. This game originally came out in 2016 for the PlayStation 4 and Xbox One, and definitely a polarizing game. Some people thought it was great. Some people thought it was kind of eh. I think it's good. I think it's a great time. And to point this out, I'm with you on 13. And I wasn't a big fan. I thought 13 was very hands off. You didn't get to do much with it. 14 was an MMORPG, so of course that's nothing like any of the other ones. 15 comes out, and they've clearly taken their lessons to heart. This is a game where you are hands-on, in the mix, a lot of gameplay in this one, a lot of stuff to do, a lot of side content. It's a video game that feels like a video game rather than a video game that wants to be a movie. So I think it's better than 13 at the very least.
Now, just to be clear, there was one that had, I don't want to say it was, people were mad about it, but there's one that was a Final Fantasy that was super sponsored by like udon noodles or something like that. Or
that was this one. Yes, that was this one. Cup noodles specifically.
Cup noodles.
Yeah, this is one of those situations where people are kind of getting angry just to get angry. If you ask me,
yeah, it was interesting.
In a modern setting, I think it's hard to get angry about modern advertising of that nature. If you're playing a game where you're walking down the street in the mall and the mall happens to have real stores from a real mall, I don't think that's bad. I think that's kind of cool, actually. If you're playing this game where you're driving around in a car and you have an iPhone and your characters talk about playing games on their phone, then yeah, there's going to be cup noodles, and that's fine. It doesn't bother me at all.
Okay. All right. So just want to say that. Yeah. So one thing, though, that is always a thing about porting to PCs, we saw this with Destiny, we saw this with a lot of other console games coming to PC, was that a big claim isn't so much that, you get any kind of difference in gameplay-wise, but you get a difference in graphic quality.
Yes.
Because consoles are consoles. We've talked about this. Whenever people send us emails or hate mail about, oh, I'm a console gamer and PCs are horrible, or I'm a PC gamer, consoles are terrible because you can't play graphics. It's not really a matter of preference or fanboy or anything like that. It's just simply PCs can play games better. Period. End of discussion.
Yeah, it's just the fact of the matter is that PCs are better at video games straight up. You shouldn't have a console if you like games. Get a PC instead. I'm completely unbiased.
I don't know about all that, but but that is something. We were just watching the video on the video portion, but we just watched the trailer, and that was one of the claims here for the port. By the way, everyone, Final Fantasy 15 Windows Edition. I don't know why they had to, not just say PC, but Windows Edition. Unscreen, refresh rate, uncapped, 4K gaming, looked pretty darn good. So I guess that's one of the main selling points of bringing a game to PC is that you get to kind of, take off the restrictors when it comes to the graphics and things like that.
Sure. When you're working with a console, you are somewhat limited by the power of that console. In this case, it's the PlayStation 4, which, don't get me wrong, one of the more powerful machines we've had as far as game consoles go. Fact of the matter is, though, it's still a console. You can pay, maybe if you are really into this hobby, you can drop $800 on a PC, get a machine that completely outclasses the PS4. And that's what this release of this game is for. This is, I've got this nice PC. Maybe I want this buttery smooth frame rate, this experience that looks gorgeous on my monitor, or my nice monitor with my nice PC, and I'm willing to pay it, or maybe rebuy a game that I've already played to play it again in its full glory. That's what this release is for. As for how it actually looks compared to the PS4 version, I mean, this is kind of a thing that you have to see for yourself. You said you showed a trailer, maybe that will kind of illustrate it, but
looks pretty good.
Yeah, sure, it looks great, and it's difficult to explain to somebody who hasn't seen both how one is better than the other. The easiest way to explain it, if you ask me, is probably the fact that it's a smoother experience. Final Fantasy 14, even on the PlayStation 4 Pro, the slightly enhanced version of the PS4, it still hitched a little bit. I mean, there are still like little stuttering actions in the gameplay. There were still moments when it didn't look as good as it could have, and it was obvious. When you play it on PC, at least the parts that I've played, it's gorgeous. It's a fantastic game, but I'm also saying this with a PC that's far too powerful for what the game needs. So what it comes down to is if you have a really nice computer and you'll know who you are, then this is a great game for you to check out and really show off. If you're wondering whether or not you can run this and if it's going to be worth the time for you and you've already played it on PS4, maybe not.
Now, again, a lot of this is focused on the graphics of it. They have something here, of course, Dolby Atmos for sound, and they have something here about the NVIDIA, grass simulation and real hair simulation. Honestly, the hair simulation is one of the least, except on that weird looking tusky beast looking thing. But the people's hair, I think, doesn't look all that great. The grass looked pretty good. I think this is more like a kind of like what Time Crisis, or not Time Crisis, Crisis, was that it's kind of a tech demo. I mean, it's pushing what your computer can probably do. So
sure, absolutely. So if you're the kind of person who's going to pay a lot for a nice computer, then of course you're going to want games to really show that off. That's what kind of what this is aiming for, I think.
Yeah, for sure. And at the same time, honestly, it looks kind of a lot like Monster Hunter, but that's just me. But okay, so there you go. Final Fantasy 15 coming out for PC actually today. So March 6th will be when it is released, and yeah, open world fantasy, of course, everything Final Fantasy. Yeah, I guess that's all we have to say about that one. Now, all right, we have time. We have about 8 minutes left. We can talk about one more topic, I'm thinking, Cory, and you have one here about, Sony, and we just kind of poo-pooed the idea of a console, but
Sure.
There's no doubt that when you buy a console and when you get into a console exclusives are amazing. There are some great games that only are ever released for console.
Yes.
So talk about Sony and talk about this new refocusing on first-party games.
Sure. So as you say, one of the big things about consoles, and this has been a thing ever since the days of the NES and the Genesis and the Super Nintendo, et cetera, one of the big things about consoles is games that only come to a particular console, and that, especially today, games that don't come to PC. So
Right.
A big thing as far as Sony goes, they recently had a release called Horizon Zero Dawn. I'm sure you've heard about.
I like that one. I did. That was
Sure.
yeah.
You liked it. A lot of people liked it. It's done exceptionally well. Interesting thing about this game and some other similar games, like for instance, a game called Bloodborne came out a couple years ago, is that they are only available on the PlayStation 4. You cannot get them on Xbox. You cannot play them on PC. So what does that mean? If you're the kind of person who just has to play every really critically acclaimed game out there, then I guess you have to buy a PS4. You better have a PS4 if you want to play these. So that makes a lot of money for Sony. It's this really solid business strategy. As much as you or I might hate it, it makes the company mad bucks. So it makes sense to me.
And we aren't just saying this, and we're gonna get focused on Sony here, but I will say that this is expanding beyond industry, where we saw with Netflix, they have $8 billion, and I think by the end of this year, they're hoping to have like something like 800 original original shows or movies, just based on Netflix. I mean, we're seeing the idea that, hey, content that we make, we produce, and is only available here is super important to having a successful platform.
Honestly, we can even go, slightly higher level thinking, like you were saying. We can talk a lot about how divisive the video game community can be. We can trace that back to the fact that back in the day, there was Super Nintendo, there was Sega Genesis, and a lot of the time you can only have one or the other. If you were a kid, maybe your folks only bought you one. So, of course, you're going to tell yourself, hey, the Genesis is way better than the Super Nintendo, and anybody who has one is a little toddler. Nintendo is for kids. These are fights that continue to this day. You have 30, 40-year-old men, fighting over the Xbox or the PlayStation. And this is very much good money for these companies. And
it's true to a point where I will say that this recent console war, and every generation is a console war. This console war, it came down to PlayStation whooped Xbox's butt. And
Yes,
then
and
and
you know
then
why that is?
and just real quick, and then Nintendo, because it was supposed to be Nintendo, Microsoft, and Sony. Those are the three. Nintendo came in and said, "We're not going to play your game. We're going to appeal to everyone. It's going to be fun."
Exactly.
So please, and tell me why Sony kicked Microsoft's butt.
Well, we just said it. No exclusives. I mean, what is there exclusive to play on Xbox? You've got your Sunset Overdrive, you got your Halo, and that's kind of it. I mean, I'm going to be honest, I have an Xbox One X that I haven't touched because all the greatest games for it I can just play on my PC, which is more powerful anyway. So if I want to play Assassin's Creed Origins, which is kind of the headliner for the Xbox One X, why would I not just play that on my PC where it's going to look better, where I already have the hardware, where it's got modding, et cetera, et cetera. You know, there's no reason to. So that's the value of exclusives. That's me being able to say, you know what, I really want to play Horizon Zero Dawn. All my friends say it's amazing. I can't get it for PC. What choice do I have but to get a PS4?
Right. So, all right. So there you have it. So this move
Nintendo, meanwhile, as you said, Nintendo doesn't even play those games. Nintendo's not interested. Nintendo wants you to have a Switch, no matter who you are, no matter what consoles you have. You will notice that you are not going to get a Mario game, generally speaking, on PC ever. You're not going to get it on PS4 or Xbox. You're going to get it on Nintendo, only ever on Nintendo. And they have a vast array of franchises that are just never going to leave Nintendo. So you have to have a Switch, pretty much.
Right. So, and hey, more to your evidence that console exclusives work.
Sure.
So, all right. So, but with that being said, what do you think about this idea that Sony is going more forward? Because this is only going to drive a wedge. And honestly, Microsoft has been saying the right words to me personally that they want to integrate their Xbox platform, their Xbox Live platform, and their, most importantly, their game library into Windows 10. If you have it available, you can stream it through your PC, play on your PC, play anything that you would on your Xbox on your PC. I love that. I love the sound of that. I don't know how I feel about Sony saying we're going to go even more into our own territory. I don't know how I feel about that.
You know, you mentioned this big Microsoft game coming out in a couple weeks. Sea of Thieves is going to be available on PC and on Xbox at the same time. And I believe leave them cross-compatible, though don't quote me on that. So yeah, that's one way of looking at this. This is saying, hey, instead of trying to fight PC, we're going to integrate PC. We're going to have the same ecosystem on both systems. I mean, both ways, money's coming to us, so that's fine.
Right.
So what Sony is saying, on the other hand, is, you know what? We want one singular stream of money from our machine, and to do that, we are willing to say to people, you know what? You have to buy our console, straight up. That's a very 90s way of thinking. And it made companies a lot of money in the 90s. So will it work? Yeah, probably. How do I feel about it? Honestly, there have been games like Horizon Zero Dawn is one of them where I haven't finished the game because I was just, I got tired of the frame rate, got tired of it running slowly. Yeah, I was just like, you know what? If I could play this on PC, I'd have put in 3 times as much time on it.
And that's something that I ran into where I played a lot of Halo. I played a lot of, and I think a lot of people my age played a lot of Halo. And console shooters were what I grew up on. After I played enough Overwatch, after I played enough, first person shooters on the PC, and I'm not talking like CS:GO, but just enough first person shooters. The input method, I feel, is just harder on a controller versus what I'm used to on a PC now. I started on one and now I can't go back because I went to PC. I feel like having that interplay is something that just personally, as the future of me playing video games, it's going to have to be on PC. It can be it can be on console, but it's also going to have to be on PC for me. So yeah, and Cory, right there, the music means that we're just flat out of time. If you want to go ahead and talk about kind of what you have out there at Popzara and what you have coming up.
Hey, so Popzara is going great. Like I said, if you want to look into your reviews of this upcoming Final Fantasy 15 Windows Edition, that's coming for sure. We've got other great reviews coming up, like Yakuza 6 pretty soon. But Popzara is not the only place that I write either. If you check out The Well-Read Mage, TheWellRedMage.com, The Well-Read Mage, I have a weekly column every Wednesday. Take a look. It's great.
All right, and we will throw a link of that in as well. And by the way, that's RED, not READ. So the well-read
That is
mage.
correct.
Right. So yep, we got that. So everyone, that's Gamer Tuesday. Thank you so much for tuning in. Thank you for joining us. And once again, Cory Galliher, our resident computer games expert. And hey, I think this was a lot of great content and a lot of games for people to of course check out. So next month we'll of course have you back on, but in the meantime, everyone, lots to chew on. And again, thank you for joining us here on Computer America. Be sure to tune in tomorrow as we have on the show the one, the only, I know I said that about all of our correspondents, Mr. Mike Cermak. It's gonna be a lot of fun. Everyone, have a great day. Thank you so much. Bye bye.